The investigation begins 3 days after Sarah Martinez walked out of Colonel Peterson's office. Phones began ringing in government buildings across Washington, D.C. Peterson's inquiry about the Distinguished Intelligence Cross had triggered a chain of secure communications that reached the highest levels of the intelligence community. At CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, Deputy Director of Operations Maria Santos received a classified brief about the authentication request. Santos had been with the agency for 23 years, working her way up through the ranks of the Directorate of Operations. She knew about every Distinguished Intelligence Cross ever awarded because she'd been involved in recommending 3 of the 4 recipients. The brief landed on her desk with a red priority flag. As she read through the details, Santos felt a chill run down her spine. The name Sarah Martinez was familiar, buried deep in her memory among dozens of operations and hundreds of assets she'd managed over her career. Santos pulled up her secure terminal and entered a series of classified search parameters. What she found made her reach for her secure phone. "This is Santos. I need to speak with Director Chen immediately." Within an hour, Santos was sitting in the director's secure conference room with 2 other senior officials. Director William Chun had been briefed on the situation during his morning intelligence update. "Remind me again about Operation Nightingale," Chun said, referring to a file that hadn't been opened in over a decade. Santos pulled up the classified operations summary on the secure display. "Afghanistan, 2011. High-value target extraction in Kandahar province. The operation was compromised from the start, but we had critical intelligence that couldn't wait. And Martinez was involved how? She wasn't supposed to be involved at all. She was a combat medic attached to a forward operating base. But our primary extraction asset was killed in the initial assault, and our backup plan fell apart when the Taliban mounted a coordinated counterattack." Santos paused, remembering the tense hours she'd spent monitoring the operation from half a world away. Martinez volunteered to go in. She had medical training, spoke basic Pashto, and she was the only American within 50 miles who could reach the target location before enemy reinforcements arrived. Chen leaned back in his chair. The operation had been before his time as director, but he'd read summaries of some of the more significant missions from that era. What was she extracting? A Pakistani intelligence officer who had been feeding us information about Taliban leadership structure and planned attacks on NATO forces. He'd been compromised and was hours away from execution. The intelligence he possessed could have prevented dozens of American casualties. Santos brought up a map showing the operation area. The problem was location. Our asset was being held in a compound in the middle of Kandahar city, surrounded by hostile forces. Any conventional extraction would have resulted in a firefight that could have escalated into an international incident. "So you sent in a medic?" "We didn't send her. She volunteered after our primary plan failed." Martinez disguised herself as a local woman seeking medical help for her husband. She walked right into the compound, administered sedatives to 3 guards, freed our asset, and got him out during a market day crowd. Chin studied the operation files. "That's impressive, but hardly worthy of the highest intelligence decoration." Santos clicked to the next page of the report. "That's not why she earned it, sir. She earned it for what happened next." The room fell silent as Santos continued. During the extraction, Martinez discovered that the Taliban wasn't just planning to execute our asset. They were planning to use his death as part of a larger operation. A coordinated attack on 3 different American bases using inside information from other compromised sources. She uncovered additional intelligence during the mission. Better than that, she volunteered to stay behind and gather more information. For 6 weeks, she operated under deep cover in Kandahar, posing as a local medical worker while identifying and documenting an entire Taliban intelligence network. Santos pulled up surveillance photos from that time period. She identified 12 Taliban intelligence officers, mapped their communication networks, and discovered plans for a major offensive that would have cost hundreds of American lives. Chen was beginning to understand the scope of Martinez's contribution. How did she get this information back to us? Dead drops, coded medical reports, and eventually a high-risk extraction when her cover was nearly blown. By the time we pulled her out, she'd provided intelligence that led to 17 successful raids and the disruption of the entire Taliban intelligence operation in Kandahar province. Another official in the room spoke up. Why isn't any of this in her military record? Santos smiled grimly. Because officially, she was never there. Her unit believed she was on special assignment with medical corps training. The CIA believed she was a military asset on loan. The operation was so compartmentalized that only 5 people knew her true role. And now one of those people is questioning whether her decoration is real. Colonel Peterson doesn't have the clearance level to know about Nightingale. His skepticism is understandable but misguided. Chun stood up and walked to the window overlooking the Virginia countryside. What's Martinez's current status? Retired from military service in 2012, honorable discharge. She's been living quietly in Arizona, working as a paramedic. No attempts to capitalize on her CIA service, no publicity seeking, no book deals or speaking engagements. She's maintained operational security even after leaving government service. And the decoration? Santos opened another file. Awarded personally by Director Brennan in a classified ceremony at Langley in 2012. The citation is still classified, but it specifically mentions extraordinary heroism and exceptional service in extremely hazardous conditions resulting in major operational successes and the preservation of American lives. Chun turned back to the group. So, we have a legitimate recipient of our highest decoration being questioned by a colonel who doesn't have the clearance to understand why she earned it. That's the situation, sir. Chun considered the implications. What's our move here? Santos had been thinking about this since she'd first seen the brief. We have several options. We could provide Peterson with a simple authentication that the decoration is genuine without revealing operational details. We can upgrade his clearance and brief him on the general nature of her service. Or we can handle this through back channels and make the problem disappear. What does Martinez want? According to the reports, she's not asking for anything. She brought the decoration for routine benefits verification and seems willing to accept whatever outcome the investigation produces. Chun appreciated that detail. Many former operatives would be demanding recognition or threatening to go public. Martinez's discretion spoke to her professionalism. There's another consideration, Santos added. Martinez saved a lot of lives during Nightingale. American soldiers who are still serving, families who still have fathers and husbands because of her actions. We owe her proper recognition. The third official, who had remained quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. What about operational security? If we authenticate her decoration, does that compromise other operations or assets? Santos shook her head. Nightingale was over 13 years ago. Most of the operational details can remain classified while still acknowledging her service. We can provide authentication without revealing specific missions. Chun made his decision. Contact Colonel Peterson directly. Provide him with official authentication of the decoration and a general citation that acknowledges extraordinary service without compromising operational details. Make it clear that further questions should be directed through appropriate intelligence channels. And Martinez? She deserves to know that her service is recognized and appreciated, even if the full story can never be told publicly. Santos nodded. I'll handle the Peterson contact personally. This kind of authentication needs to come from the highest levels to carry proper weight. As the meeting concluded, Chun had one final thought. Santos, make sure Peterson understands that Martinez is exactly the kind of person that decoration was created to honor. People who serve in the shadows, who risk everything for their country, who never ask for recognition, but deserve it anyway. Later that afternoon, Santos placed a secure call to Colonel Peterson's office. The conversation was brief, but definitive. Colonel Peterson, this is Deputy Director Santos from CIA. I'm calling regarding your inquiry about the Distinguished Intelligence Cross attributed to Sarah Martinez. Peterson sat up straighter in his chair. Yes, ma'am. The decoration is authentic. Mrs. Martinez is indeed one of only 4 recipients of this decoration. Her service was exceptional, and her heroism was extraordinary. The specific details of her actions remain classified, but I can tell you that she saved numerous American lives through her courage and dedication. Peterson felt embarrassed about his earlier skepticism. I apologize for questioning the authenticity, ma'am. I've never encountered this decoration before. No apology necessary, Colonel. Your diligence and verification is exactly what we would expect. Mrs. Martinez deserves to have her service properly recognized and her benefits processed without delay. After the call ended, Peterson sat quietly in his office, looking at the small pin that had seemed so impossible just days before. He thought about the quiet woman who had sat across from his desk, calm and composed despite his obvious doubt. Sarah Martinez wasn't just one of 4 recipients of America's highest intelligence decoration. She was a hero whose story might never be fully told, whose sacrifice would remain largely unknown, but whose service had protected countless American lives. Peterson picked up Sarah's file and wrote a priority note for immediate benefits approval. It was the least he could do for someone who had given so much for her country. #recognition and respect. Sarah Martinez was restocking supplies in the ambulance when her phone rang. She'd been working a double shift at Phoenix Emergency Medical Services, and the Arizona heat was making the already exhausting work even more challenging. When she saw the unfamiliar number with a Virginia area code, she almost didn't answer. Mrs. Martinez? This is Colonel Peterson from the VA office. I wanted to call you personally about your recent visit. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. It had been a week since she'd left her Distinguished Intelligence Cross in Peterson's office, and she'd been expecting this call, though she wasn't sure what news it would bring. Yes, Colonel. Mrs. Martinez, I owe you an apology. A sincere and heartfelt apology. Your decoration has been authenticated through the highest levels of the intelligence community. Not only is it genuine, but I've been informed that your service was extraordinary. Sarah leaned against the ambulance, feeling a mixture of relief and vindication. Thank you for letting me know, sir. There's more. I received a call from Deputy Director Santos at CIA. She specifically wanted me to understand that you are exactly the kind of person that decoration was created to honor. She said you saved numerous American lives through actions that required exceptional courage. Peterson paused, and Sarah could hear the genuine respect in his voice when he continued. Mrs. Martinez, I've been in the military for over 3 decades. I've served with heroes, I've seen courage under fire, and I've witnessed extraordinary sacrifice. But what you did, whatever it was, impressed people at the highest levels of our intelligence services. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She was thinking about those weeks in Afghanistan, the fear that had been her constant companion, the weight of responsibility she'd carried knowing that American lives depended on her actions. Mrs. Martinez, are you there? Yes, sir. I'm here. I want you to know that your benefits will be processed immediately with full approval. And I want you to know that I will personally ensure that your decoration is treated with the respect it deserves. I appreciate that, Colonel. There's something else. Deputy Director Santos asked me to convey a message. She said that while the full story of your service may never be told publicly, it is known and appreciated by those who matter. She wanted you to know that your sacrifice was not forgotten. After ending the call, Sarah sat in the ambulance for several minutes, processing the conversation. For years, she'd carried the weight of her classified service alone. The operations she'd participated in, the risks she'd taken, the intelligence she'd gathered, all of it had been locked away in secure files, known only to a handful of people. 2 weeks later, Sarah received an official letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Her benefits had been approved with full retroactive payments. But, more importantly, enclosed with the letter was her Distinguished Intelligence Cross, returned in a new presentation case with an official authentication certificate. The certificate was brief but meaningful. This decoration is awarded to Sarah Martinez in recognition of extraordinary heroism and exceptional service in extremely hazardous conditions. Her actions resulted in major operational successes and the preservation of American lives. Awarded by the Central Intelligence Agency, 2012. That evening, Sarah called her daughter Elena, who lived in California with her two young children. Elena had always known her mother was a veteran, but she'd never fully understood the extent of Sarah's service. "Mom, you never told me you had received such an important decoration." Sarah smiled. "It's not the kind of thing you talk about at dinner, sweetheart. Some parts of military service are meant to stay private. But you're a hero, Mom. You save people's lives." "I did my job, Elena. When your country asks you to serve, you serve. When people need help, you help them. That's not heroism. That's just duty." Elena disagreed, but she knew better than to argue with her mother about military service. Sarah had always been humble about her time in Afghanistan, describing herself simply as a medic who had done her job. What Elena couldn't fully grasp was the complexity of what her mother had accomplished. Sarah hadn't just saved lives through medical care. She'd saved lives by infiltrating enemy territory, gathering intelligence, and risking everything to protect American soldiers she'd never met. A month later, Sarah was surprised to receive another call, this time from a different number in Virginia. "Mrs. Martinez? This is Deputy Director Santos from CIA. I hope you don't mind me calling you directly." Sarah was immediately alert. "Not at all, ma'am. I wanted to personally thank you for your service during Operation Nightingale. I was one of the people coordinating your mission from Langley, and I've never forgotten what you accomplished." Santos paused. "Mrs. Martinez, in my 23 years with the agency, I've worked with some exceptional people. But what you did in Afghanistan was remarkable not just for its success, but for your willingness to volunteer for an assignment that was far beyond your official duties." "I was in a position to help, ma'am. It seemed like the right thing to do." Santos smiled, recognizing the understated way that Sarah described her extraordinary service. "Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that the intelligence you gathered prevented a major Taliban offensive that could have resulted in hundreds of casualties. The network you helped us identify and disrupt continued to provide intelligence benefits for years afterward." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since Afghanistan, she was hearing the specific impact of her actions. "There's something else I want you to know," Santos continued. "3 of the soldiers whose lives you saved during that mission have gone on to distinguished military careers. One of them is now a senior officer who has trained hundreds of other soldiers. Your actions didn't just save individual lives, they had a ripple effect that has protected many more people over the years." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her apartment, looking out at the Arizona sunset. She thought about the young woman she'd been in Afghanistan, frightened but determined, carrying out a mission that seemed impossible but absolutely necessary. She thought about the Pakistani intelligence officer she'd extracted, wondering if he was still alive, if his family was safe. She thought about the Taliban intelligence network she'd helped expose, and all the American soldiers who had come home safely because those plans had been disrupted. Most of all, she thought about duty. Not the abstract concept of patriotic service, but the immediate personal responsibility of using whatever skills and courage you possess to protect others when they need protection. The next morning, Sarah returned to work at the emergency medical service. She responded to car accidents, heart attacks, and domestic violence calls. She saved lives through medical skill and compassion, just as she had during her official military service. But now she carried something additional, the knowledge that her classified service had been recognized and appreciated by those who understood its significance. The Distinguished Intelligence Cross wasn't just a piece of metal. It was acknowledgement that ordinary people sometimes do extraordinary things when their country and their fellow citizens need them most. Colonel Peterson, meanwhile, had learned something valuable about assumptions and respect. He'd updated his training procedures to ensure that unusual military decorations would be verified through proper channels rather than dismissed out of hand. He'd also gained a deeper appreciation for the many ways that people serve their country, including service that might never be publicly acknowledged. Sarah Martinez continued living quietly in Arizona, working as a paramedic, visiting her daughter and grandchildren when possible. She never sought publicity for her CIA service, never wrote a book or gave interviews about her experiences. She remained, as she'd always been, a professional who had done her job well when her country needed her most. The Distinguished Intelligence Cross remained in its case, brought out only for official purposes. But Sarah no longer felt the weight of unrecognized service. Her sacrifice had been acknowledged by those who mattered, her heroism had been properly documented, and her story, though it might never be fully told, was now part of the official record of American courage in the service of freedom. In a world where so much military service goes unnoticed, where so many veterans struggle for recognition and respect, Sarah Martinez had achieved something rare, official acknowledgement of extraordinary service that had truly made a difference. She was one of only 4 recipients of America's highest intelligence decoration, and she had earned every bit of that honor through courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the lives of her fellow Americans. Sarah Martinez had always been careful with her military decorations. Each medal, each ribbon told a story of service, sacrifice, and honor. But there was one particular pin that she kept in a small velvet box, separate from the others. It was a simple-looking piece of metal, barely 2 inches across, with an eagle clutching arrows and an olive branch. Most people wouldn't look twice at it, but Sarah knew its true value wasn't in gold or silver. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning at the Veterans Affairs office in downtown Phoenix. Sarah had come in to update her disability benefits paperwork, a routine visit she made every few years. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, and fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she sat among other veterans, each carrying their own invisible wounds from service. When her name was called, she followed a young clerk to a small office where Colonel James Peterson sat behind a metal desk. Peterson was old-school military, with silver hair cut in a precise fade and uniform creases sharp enough to cut paper. His chest displayed an impressive array of ribbons and medals from 3 decades of service, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. "Mrs. Martinez," Peterson said, barely looking up from his paperwork, "I see here you're claiming service-connected disabilities from your time in Afghanistan. Says here you were with the 101st Airborne Division." Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. 2 tours, 2009 to 2012. Peterson's eyes scanned her file, then moved to the small collection of military items she'd brought for verification. Standard procedure required veterans to provide proof of service and any relevant decorations that might support their claims. Sarah had brought her Purple Heart, her combat medical badge, and several campaign ribbons. But then Peterson's gaze fixed on something else. The small pin Sarah had almost forgotten she'd included, nestled among her other decorations. "What's this?" Peterson picked up the pin, turning it over in his weathered hands. "That's my Distinguished Intelligence Cross, sir." Peterson's eyebrows shot up. He set the pin down like it had burned him and leaned back in his chair. "Ma'am, I need you to understand something. This decoration you're showing me, it's not something you just pick up at a surplus store." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "I'm aware of that, sir. The Distinguished Intelligence Cross is the highest decoration awarded by the Central Intelligence Agency for extraordinary heroism in the line of duty. It's rarer than the Medal of Honor." Peterson's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent his career around military honors. Only 4 people have ever received this decoration since it was established in 1996. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and distant chatter from the waiting room. Sarah met Peterson's skeptical gaze without flinching. "I understand your doubt, Colonel. Most people don't know this decoration exists." Peterson picked up the pin again, examining it more closely. The craftsmanship was impeccable, the details sharp and precise. But doubt clouded his features. "Mrs. Martinez, with all due respect, your service record shows you as a combat medic. There's no indication of intelligence work, no classified operations, nothing that would warrant this level of recognition." Sarah had heard this before. Her official military personnel file was deliberately sparse, showing only her basic training, medical corps certification, and deployment dates. There were no mentions of the 6 months she'd spent detached from her unit, no records of the covert operations she'd supported, no documentation of the night that changed everything. Sometimes, Colonel, the most important service doesn't appear in the official records. Peterson stood up, his chair rolling backward. He walked to the window that overlooked the busy street below, hands clasped behind his back. Mrs. Martinez, I've been in the military for 32 years. I've served alongside CIA operatives, worked joint operations with intelligence assets, and I've never even seen one of these decorations in person. He turned back to face her. The Distinguished Intelligence Cross isn't just rare because it's hard to earn. It's rare because the operations that warrant it are so classified that sometimes the recipients themselves can't talk about what they did. The ceremonies are held in secure facilities with no media coverage. The citations are classified for decades. Sarah remained silent, letting Peterson work through his skepticism. If this pin is authentic, Peterson continued, then you're one of only 4 people on Earth who have earned it. That would make you part of an extremely exclusive club that includes operatives who have risked everything for national security. He picked up his phone and dialed an extension. Janet, I need you to put me through to the Defense Intelligence Agency Verification Office. Yes, it's about a decoration authentication. Sarah listened as Peterson explained the situation to someone on the other end of the line. She could hear the doubt in his voice, the professional skepticism of a career military officer who'd seen too many fake claims and fraudulent decorations. After hanging up, Peterson sat back down. They're going to need to verify this through official channels. It could take weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, I have to treat this as a potentially fraudulent claim. I understand, sir. Do you, though? Peterson leaned forward, his expression serious. Fraudulent claims of military decorations are federal crimes. If this pin turns out to be fake, if you've misrepresented your service, you could face serious legal consequences. Sarah nodded. She'd known this moment would come eventually. Every time she'd moved, every time she'd updated her benefits, every time she'd had to interact with the VA system, she'd risked this exact conversation. Colonel, I've carried that pin for over a decade. I've never used it to gain anything, never displayed it publicly, never claimed benefits based on it. I brought it today only because the paperwork said to bring all military decorations for verification. Peterson studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Sarah's expression remained calm, her voice steady. There was something about her demeanor that gave him pause. She didn't seem nervous or evasive like most people caught in a lie would be. Mrs. Martinez, if what you're telling me is true, then you've been involved in operations that most people will never know about. Operations that required extraordinary courage and sacrifice. Sarah finally allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes the best operations are the ones that nobody ever hears about, Colonel. Sometimes the greatest service happens in the shadows, with no recognition, no glory, and no public acknowledgement. Peterson returned to his desk and made several notes in Sarah's file. I'm going to have to flag this case for special review. Higher authorities will need to make the determination about your decoration's authenticity. I expected as much. In the meantime, your other benefits claims will proceed normally. Your service as a combat medic is well documented and honored. Sarah gathered her belongings, carefully placing each decoration back in its protective case. As she reached for the disputed pin, Peterson held up his hand. I'm going to need to hold on to that for now. Evidence protocols. Sarah hesitated for just a moment before nodding. Of course. As she left the office, Sarah could feel Peterson watching her go. She knew he was probably on the phone before she even reached the waiting room, making calls, asking questions, trying to unravel the mystery of the quiet woman who claimed to be one of only 4 recipients of America's most secretive decoration. What Peterson didn't know, what he couldn't know from her files or her appearance, was that Sarah Martinez had indeed earned every molecule of that pin. And the story of how she'd earned it was still classified at the highest levels of government, locked away in files that might never see daylight. The real question wasn't whether the pin was authentic. The real question was whether the system was ready to acknowledge what Sarah had done to earn it.